Perhaps we could start with you, James. What are the most important things that they need to do?
I think when you're looking for your next career or looking for your first job, I've spent many, many years interviewing a whole range of people, and I generally find it incredibly frustrating how ill-prepared people generally are when they start that career search. When you look at the information that's available today by the internet, Google, etc., that there genuinely is no reason or no excuse not to be immaculately prepared. And when you consider that getting that job could change your life, if you put it into that context, there ought to be a message in there that says if it's so important, then you absolutely need to understand everything about the organisation that you're applying for, everything about the individual that you're going to meet, every detail about the position that you're applying for. A lot of that information is available on the company's career site, their website, information, brochures. And yet when I actually do meet somebody and say, tell me a bit about your perception of the organisation, tell me about your understanding of the opportunity, it's very, very limited. Just to give you an example, only a week ago, one of my investment businesses had asked me to select a finance director for them. And I had a short list of 3 candidates that I met. And my first question to each of those candidates were, before you came to see me today, did you go to Companies House and download the company's accounts as a finance director to kind of prepare yourself for the discussion? Of the 3 candidates I met, how many do you think actually had downloaded the accounts? None. So when you put that into context, had you have downloaded those accounts, the quality of that discussion that they would have had with me, even a comment like, James, I've noticed that the company's asset base has declined over the last 2 years, or I see your margins are improving, or I noticed that the level of debt in the business has gone down, immediately puts me in a different position of saying, actually, he knows what he's talking about, he's clearly done the research, and mentally, the light bulb goes on. The mere fact he said, actually, I didn't realise you were expecting me to do that. I said, absolutely wasn't expecting, but I just wanted to understand what level of research you did. Clearly, this is your final interview as you're meeting with me. I just wanted to understand how seriously you've taken the opportunity of coming along for a final interview. So that's just a very simple illustration of what a £3 investment would have done to get my accounts and actually understand what he was going to be talking about. So a lot of the book that I've focused on is my sort of 25 years experience of meeting and interviewing people and just consistently being surprised at something I consider to be such an important event in somebody's life, yet the importance that people give to that, it just generally is surprising. I think in the graduate market, I think there are a number of situations whereby right now there are not that many positions available. Despite all the research that I think we're fed at the moment, my expectation is I actually think the number of jobs coming into the market for graduates will increase this year against the market perceptions. I think the general economy, I expect to do better. I think financial services has done better in the last 2 years than anybody could have expected, and I can actually anticipate more jobs will come out of that. I think consulting firms, accounting firms have had a very difficult period in the last couple of years, but actually I see some green shoots there too. So I do actually think the market will pick up this year. I think graduates who are in a position where they don't have a job, I'm an absolutely strong believer that rather than sitting at home thinking about it, I think any opportunity to gain work experience, I think is an absolute must. I think the information out today talking about employers giving more value for somebody who actually has bridged a gap and done something practical, I think does make a difference. So I think strategically, I think they should be out there, you should be networking, I think you should do everything you can to put yourself in a position where you become an attractive prospect to a potential employer.
If you can't get a job, how do you go about getting that first internship or that first foot through the door?
I think that you've got to be a little bit creative. I mean, maybe because I'm on television, I get inundated with people writing to me randomly. So, I think that you have to do all of the above. I don't think there is one magical solution that you say you must follow your first career advice. I think you network, you speak to people, you attend events, but also you make a list of the organisations that you ideally would like to work for. You know, every one of those organisations, you know, has a website, has contact details, and again, there is no excuse not to be able to do that. I think there are, so for example, if you take in that situation, just spraying email CVs is probably not the smartest thing to do. And I'll give you a live example. 2 weeks ago, my reception called me and said, James, somebody has just dropped off a private and confidential letter for you. Would you like me to bring it up? Now, because we don't get too many private and confidential hand-delivered letters, so I said, fine. And it was somebody's CV, beautifully written, nice paper, with a picture, fantastic covering letter. Now, had that have come via the email, I probably wouldn't have even got to see it. But the fact that he or she took the initiative and thought, I need to get that in front of him and in a way that he will see it. The fact it didn't arrive at 9 o'clock in the morning, it came at 11:15. I think she'd always thought about the fact, in the in-tray post, he won't see it because it'll be in a pile. But at 11:15, it's a bit of an odd time. So just because I found it quite humorous, I called her and said, listen, I've got your CV. Firstly, can I ask you, did you personally hand deliver it? She said, I did actually. Big tick in the box for me. And I said, was it coincidental the time, or did you think about it? And she told me exactly that. She said, I thought if I do it at the end of the day, you might not take any notice. If I do it at the beginning of the day, it'll be in a batch. So I had to pick a time that I thought, you know. So the moral of what I'm saying is, that individual is no different to anybody else. He or she needs a job and they want to make a difference. And thinking outside the box, being creative, you know, people that you know, friends that you know, getting them to introduce you to potential employers. And I think that the key message, and I 100% accept the argument about whether interns should be paid or not paid. I think with 18% unemployment, I think if you can get in and you can get that experience, I think it's worth doing. Clearly there are financial challenges, but what do you need to do to present yourself better? I think there's no question. I think the subject of whether you should or shouldn't have a degree, I think if you look at the fact that this is for the rest of your life, I think today we do live in a global economy. We do have, you know, a global employment workforce. Around the world, most countries are taking the principle of degrees a lot more seriously. If you look at the amount of graduates that Asia is pumping out by the millions now, I think longer term, if you're in a position where you're not a graduate, I do honestly think you're handicapped. So I think there's no doubt in my mind. You know, look at me, I'm one to talk. I left school at 16 with nothing. But today, if I had that choice, I absolutely would recommend the degree. And I think anything that you can do, the issue is not to be sitting there thinking, you know, where do I start? You know, newspapers are full of jobs. There are 100 job boards. There are thousands of jobs out there. There are opportunities. You know, I'm not saying every one of them are right for you, but you need a place to start, and you just have to use initiative.
James, there's a question I think is on everybody's mind. We all want to know, did you give her a job?
I've got her in for a second interview. You know, and I mean, just to give you an idea, I mean, now 14% of my workforce come via the intern route. We've genuinely found that people, when they come through an intern, it gives you an opportunity to see them, to work with them, to see whether they fit in, etc. And if I'm really honest, we don't hire them on the basis we'll give them a permanent job. But I've been absolutely staggered at how 3 months later, the number of employees come to me and said, James, we should give her a crack. She's amazing. They've done this, they've done that, which of course you never get through an interview. And I think that opportunity to see somebody work is the best way you could sell yourself. And I think the number of people that we've converted, and I sit there and think, but we don't have a vacancy. And then I get so much pressure from some of the employees who desperately want me to give them a job. So I mean, I'm a big believer in the intern program.
For children now coming out of school and then going to university, do they need to seriously consider having another language and an understanding of other cultures?
James, do you want to start with that?
I think I go back to the point. I think we are absolutely living in a global economy, and I think, to me, it's probably more important today than I think it's ever been before. And I think just because of the impact of technology and how, you know, one of the things that I found really interesting, I was at a presentation last night, and I learned that actually Britain is the world's leading exporter of online goods and services. So our international strength around the world and how we sell goods and services, it's better than it's ever been before. And the importance of understanding cultures, languages, and to be able to maximise an international business, I think is an absolute must. And I think the education system probably should do more to encourage other languages. Colleges and universities around the country, the one thing that genuinely does impress me is the number of Chinese students I see across the board. And, you know, so what are the Chinese saying to me? That they're recognising that English as a second language is clearly very important. The question is, the English-speaking world are not saying the same in reverse. So actually, when there's 1.4 billion people, if we're to believe the statistics that we read, that China will become a global superpower in the next 10 or 15 years, its economic strength and the number of jobs that it will create, why shouldn't Chinese be a language on the agenda? I think education is becoming a business. It's very accountable now. It's very financially measured. I think with the whole issue of league tables and transparency, you know, I think whether we like it or not, I think we've entered into that environment where measurability is absolutely key. So there's clearly a lot of pressure, I think, on the academics, you know, to perform and to deliver results. Ultimately, I think whether you're from the art sector or from your business sector, you know, when I did a session recently with some people looking for jobs, and I put them in two rooms and I said, you know, on the left-hand side, you think you're going for an interview. On the right-hand side, what I'd like you to think of is this is not an interview, this is a sales presentation, and the objective of the sales presentation is, like in any sale, you have to establish the need of the client and you have to present a solution. And this particular example, you are the solution. And it was amazing just the change of mindset that people had, because I think the concept of interviewing in itself has different connotations. But the reality is an interview is a sale. Because unless you can understand what the need of the employer is, what exactly are they looking for? And I think if candidates or potential candidates could balance the difference between questions and answers, and I absolutely recommend that every interview should be at least a 50-50 situation. 50% of the time is about you asking the questions to demonstrate who you are, and 50% of the time is the employer asking the questions. The general norm is it's 80-20. So 80% of the time is taken up by the employer saying, tell me about yourself, what have you done, and your qualifications, etc., etc. What tells me is actually the candidate didn't really get a grasp of what's the job all about. So they don't perform very well at the second interview, and most interviews are a process. So I think the core message, certainly from my own experience, is if we could, the way we prepare potential students is make them realise that the interview concept is a sales scenario. And I think if just by putting it that way, you will certainly see them come to life better than they are at the moment. I think just on that point about preparation, I think I absolutely agree that students should not spend 3 years preparing for a job. But I do believe that maybe the last term of their university degree course would be wholly appropriate to give them a bit of exposure, because it's not a 3-year preparation. You know, you can have a 4-week program. And my daughter just graduated from university, and just watching the amount of downtime and the spare time that university students have, there is a lot of opportunity that you can utilise more effectively in terms of giving them more awareness and the importance of what they need to do. I think, and I fully endorse and agree that it should be, you know, interns should be paid. One of the things that slightly concerns me is when you've got 18% unemployment in that field, I would be very nervous to do anything that prevents graduates from getting the opportunity of getting that intern opportunity. And if, you know, government stipulates legislation that prevents that, and organisations then stop taking interns, then are we cutting our nose to spite our face? So, you know, I think clearly a very strong argument that says they should be paid. But right now, if employers said, well, if you're going to legislate against that, we don't have the funds, we don't really have the opportunity. We thought we were doing, you know, a service to take people on, to give them the work experience, and as a result of legislation, it stops happening. Are we being more detrimental to the potential graduates? So, yeah, I think there are two sides of that particular argument, and I'm not sure either one is right or wrong, but I wouldn't want to do anything, because I'm concerned that 18% for a Western economy like Britain to have unemployment at that rate for graduates, I think is quite concerning.